This is a simple resupply mission.
Carrying 500 infantrymen and tows of ammunition to a dying island outpost.
According to Japanese intelligence, no American patrol vessels are within 200 nautical miles of this position.
They thought they were invisible. But no one is invisible to history. On the cramped bridge, the dim light from the console illuminates the strained face of the communications officer. His wife wrote about the faded cherry blossom festival.
Its delicate beauty symbolized the fleet itself. Beautiful, yet fragile.
His fleet comprised 6 destroyers. Total troops, 3,000 men.
Plan: deliver at 3 o'clock and retreat before dawn.
In the crosshairs of the American submarine patrols, that number was just an estimate. 3,000 souls relying on a single piece of flawed intelligence.
The survival rate was based on the assumption that the Allies were still grappling with old reconnaissance technology.
It was at this moment, illuminated by the enemy's flare, that Admiral Sato realized the true gravity of their situation.
Admiral! 在理のない死号ですね。これはどうやら我々とのものではないようですね。
The signal was not a submarine echo. It was not radio traffic.
His ships maintained course. Admiral Sato held on to his pride.
He closed his eyes. The story you are about to hear has never appeared in any official IJN document.
The strange signal echoed again.
That signal indicated the enemy wasn't just seeing them. The enemy knew exactly who they were, where they were going, and how many they were.
That strange signal, the invisible ping echoing on the screen,
was not just a technical glitch. It was a death knell for the Japanese Imperial Navy's doctrine of naval warfare. To comprehend the Admiral Sato's dread, we must step back and look at the Pacific map in 1943. The main theater of war was no longer a single battlefield, but a tropical labyrinth of small islands, stretching from the Solomon Islands to the coast of New Guinea. The core of the fight was Rabaul, a natural fortress IJN called Seidler on name. Rabaul was the critical logistics hub, resupplying every Japanese outpost, but it was slowly being strangled. The timeline had entered the reverse stage.
1942 was the year of Japanese dominance. 1943 was the Allied resurgence.
Japanese tactics shifted from offensive to
to desperate defense.
They could not compete with the immense American capacity for shipbuilding and aircraft production.
To sustain their forward units, they had to rely on the Tokyo Express, high-speed transport convoys.
Often destroyers, running at night through the New Georgia Strait, what Americans called the slot.
This strategy relied on two key weaknesses of the Allies.
Lack of night combat experience and outdated radar technology.
The Japanese Navy, with its superior Type 93 long-range torpedoes and the ability to train sailors to fight. Admiral Sato's ships, the Yukikaze, and 5 accompanying destroyers were part of that express tactic.
Scale and tactics. A typical Tokyo Express run carried an average of 1,500, 3,000 troops and 150 tons of vital cargo.
They moved at high speed, around 30 knots. Japanese officers were confident they could detect American ships visually or via hydrophones before. Japanese intelligence reports, outdated and scarce due to resource limitations, were consistent. America is blind in the dark.
But there was a hidden objective the Americans pursued besides sinking transports: morale.
Every successful Japanese resupply mission was a blow to the spirit of the American troops fighting in the jungle. Conversely, every time the Express was intercepted, it was a profound psychological hit, increasing the desperation of isolated Japanese forces on the islands.
Environment and geography. The area was more than just ocean. Hot, humid weather, dense fog, and this. These fiery islands were unlike any other place.
The heat itself was a kind of enemy. One American sailor recorded in his diary.
It coated everything with a sticky, damp film. The fog pressed down on the sea like a thick blanket. This fog, which was an advantage for Japanese concealment, suddenly became a deadly trap.
Intelligence error. The IJN's greatest mistake wasn't tactical. It was technological hubris.
Per week. They were unaware that the U.S. had installed the latest SG radar, a short wavelength microwave system that was
SG radar could detect a destroyer at 15 nautical miles, while the Japanese radar had poor resolution and could only detect large targets.
This surprise completely reversed the expected casualty rate.
Initially, the Japanese predicted 5% casualties.
Now, with just one encounter, that figure could reach 90%.
A letter later confiscated, allegedly from a junior officer on the Ur, a friendly ship sunk shortly after this.
We are fighting against an enemy who can see through the night. That is not fighting, that is suicide.
And this was only the surface of a storm, quietly changing direction.
The decision to maintain the Tokyo Express route was not a strategy, but a desperate gamble governed by Japan's internal political dynamics.
Following continuous setbacks, Tokyo could not confront the reality of America's massive production capacity.
While American shipyards could launch a destroyer in under 6 months, the Japanese leadership clung to the outdated quantity.
Logistically, Japan was nearing exhaustion. The rate of ammunition and food supply had drastically decreased,
forcing them to prioritize combat vessels over transports.
To compensate for this deficit, destroyers, like Admiral Sato's vessel, had to undertake transport duties. This increased the strain on the crew, not only facing Allied fire but also grappling with physical and mental decline due to lack of sleep and poor rations. The destroyer Yukikaze, commanded by Sato, was a perfect example.
It was an old ship, built in the early 1920s, yet still one of the most reliable escorts.
Its maximum speed was 34 knots, but heavily laden with 500 troops and ammunition, the actual speed dropped to only 28 knots.
This speed was sufficient to outpace transports, but too slow to escape American cruisers.
Breakdown rate for Japanese destroyer engines had surged to 15% by late 1943 due to poor maintenance and continuous use.
On the front of intelligence and politics, chaos was rampant.
The Japanese Navy and Army constantly clashed over resource priorities and operational direction.
The Army needed resupply. The Navy needed to preserve the fleet.
Chronicles. The decision to run the convoy that night was the result of a reluctant compromise, driven by a promise from Tokyo that tensions were high as the admirals reviewed the latest reports from the Pacific Theater. The future of the empire hung in the balance. While Sato was striving to evade enemy sight, Japanese intelligence officers at Rabaul systematically ignored. This willful neglect stemmed from pride. A technology the Japanese could not produce themselves could not possibly be superior to what they had.
This created a vicious cycle of complacency and misinformation.
The appeals of Japanese scientists to accelerate radar development were dismissed. One general even questioned, if we are better night fighters than they are, why do we need an expensive device to see in the dark?
And that is the viral question history asks. Was this strategy or a desperate gamble?
Like the serrated wings of the Japanese aircraft trying to cut through the rain, Sato's crew stepped onto the deck.
They did not know that decades later, the microwave technology they scorned would appear in everyone's smartphone.
Behind the numbers and maps were people about to step into a storm.
Fractured truth always lies in the stories never recorded in official chronicles.
The story of that night was not just a clash of steel and technology, but a collision between the absolute...
The crew on the Japanese destroyers were accustomed to darkness.
という画家の来学士は山本銀佐はな、あの夜の羽毛の異兵を日記に刀したと。
We had believed darkness was our friend, but tonight it was not a comforting friend. It was a shroud.
When that strange radar signal echoed for the third time, it sowed doubt. This was hesitation. The commanding officer ordered them to maintain speed, adhere to the plan.
But in the pilot house, a small chaos erupted. There were whispers. We've been spotted. How?
The Japanese soldier was trained to accept fate, but they were not trained to fight a phantom enemy.
The silence of the enemy was more terrifying than the roar of cannon.
It indicated they were being watched, tracked, and precisely localized.
They were men, awaiting an invisible blow from some unseen corner. He was a man of honor, driven by the order to resupply the starving troops on the island. His motive was simple: complete the mission, regardless of risk. Upon receiving the report of the strange signal,
Sato's first reaction was denial.
Maintain course. It's static interference. The Americans don't have this capability.
However, the pressure from his superiors in Rabaul weighed heavily on him. If he turned back, not only would the resupply...
In that moment, Sato was not just fighting the enemy. He was fighting his own culture of honor. Pride forbade him from acknowledging a technological truth he could not comprehend. He staked the lives of 3,000 men on the blind faith that Japanese naval excellence would overcome any technology.
At the same time, 15 nautical miles away, Lieutenant Johnson, the radar operator on the American destroyer, was staring at the brand new SG radar screen.
He saw nothing with the naked eye.
All was night and rain.
But on the screen, 6 small, sharp blips were moving in perfect formation.
The strength of SG radar was its accuracy and its ability to see through rain.
This was microwave wavelength, a technology the Japanese lacked.
The only weakness of the system was that it was unproven in real combat.
Could it truly lock targets for accurate gunnery?
Could the gunnery officers, accustomed to visual targeting, completely trust a green-tinted spot?
This very slight doubt of the Americans, whether the new technology would work, was the temporary balance between the two fleets.
But a signal ignored for just a few minutes changed the entire plan.
Seaman Smith, fictional name, on an American destroyer, the first to spot the Japanese ships through infrared binoculars.
Felt a small hesitation. He didn't just see warships. He saw infantrymen crowded onto the decks.
He knew those ships were packed with desperate, exhausted men.
The order was clear. Annihilate.
But personal morality posed a question.
Are we shooting at fighting soldiers or victims trying to survive? This was war, but attacking transports
evoked an internal conflict that many American soldiers faced.
The final truth. America didn't just have SG radar.
They had broken the Japanese code.
Allied intelligence knew the exact route, the timing, and crucially, the target of Sato's convoy. That strange radar signal was not random.
It was part of an American double intelligence tactic, using decoded information to place the SG-equipped ships in the perfect position.
Then waiting for the radar confirmation, creating a lethal certainty.
The Japanese were led by false data from Rabaul.
And through these conflicting voices, a fractured truth began to emerge.
The darkness of the Pacific did not just conceal the ships. It concealed the fractured lines in the Japanese command structure.
And the distorted truths that Japanese society accepted. At Rabaul headquarters, there was no consensus. Admiral Sato's order to proceed with the transport mission was the result of a fierce argument
between the area naval commander and the Army Chief of Staff.
The naval commander argued, "We must preserve the destroyers. American radar is improving. Every Tokyo Express run is now a guaranteed loss."
Our infantrymen are starving. Better to lose ships than lose the island. Honor forbids us from retreating merely because of a few static signals.
Ultimately, political pressure from Tokyo, which needed to maintain the illusion of victory, overrode military logic. This was not leadership based on truth, but on desire. This internal dispute became an invisible burden on every sailor. While the Japanese Navy clung to their night torpedo tactics, the US Navy was executing a tactical revolution based on radar.
The mistake of the Japanese was inflexibility. Their tactics had only two modes: attack or complete retreat.
They lacked the ability to adapt flexibly in combat when the enemy held an information advantage.
The innovation of the Americans, besides SG radar, was the creation of the Combat Information Center banks.
On U.S. ships, radar operators, communications officers.
This allowed them to make firing decisions within seconds, before the Japanese even had time to spot them visually.
This speed of decision-making was 3 times faster than the Japanese command system.
In the home front, the Japanese populace was fed a steady stream of propaganda about grand victories.
The press never mentioned sunk transports or new American technology.
Every loss was explained away as a strategic withdrawal or heroic sacrifice.
Japanese society, isolated from information, still believed in the invincibility of the empire.
The brutal realities of war, starving soldiers, ships vanishing without explanation.
After the war, many surviving Japanese officers faced the harsh reality. This was a truth more bitter than battlefield defeat.
Viral question posed: who truly won this war? Was it the fighting soldier?
Or the system capable of producing technology faster and more sustainably?
The rain continued to pour. It washed away the dirt, but it could not wash away the escalating fear on the Japanese ships. Admiral Sato's convoy maintained formation, cutting across the pitch-black sea, just 30 minutes from the drop-off point.
In that moment, at the Combat Information Center of the American cruiser USS Helena, equipped with SG radar,
Ten, 9, 8, 7.
It was the moment of certainty. The SG radar had locked the targets.
It was no longer static interference.
It was 6 perfectly aligned ships.
Seven, 6, 5, 4, 4, 3.
The American Admiral, trusting the new technology, gave the order.
Illuminate targets. Turn on the searchlights.
4, 3.
One ping changed history.
The next moment was a brutal clash between light and darkness. 2 brilliant beams of light from the American ship swept across the ocean surface, piercing straight through the rain.
It was not just light. It was utter exposure. On the Yukikaze, well, Sato. He had lost the gamble. He saw the enemy. But it was too late.
His enemy had seen him long ago.
In a moment of panic, the Japanese command ordered, all ships turn hard to starboard, launch torpedoes!
But it was too slow.
Man's note. The Americans had anticipated this thanks to intelligence analysis.
Instantly, the American ships responded. The illumination was maintained, turning the Japanese ships into perfect floating targets.
The first shell was not just an explosion.
It was a thunderbolt aimed directly at the heart of Japanese pride.
15 seconds later, the first American 6-inch shell struck the lead destroyer, turning its magazine into a massive fireball.
It was a devastating assault. The American ships fired with terrifying accuracy. It was a massacre from a safe distance, where the Americans only saw blips on a screen, while the Japanese only saw
The silence after the storm lasted only minutes.
The brilliant light from the burning destroyer reflected on the sea, creating a surreal contrast with the pitch-black night.
This was the peak crisis for Admiral Sato. In just 6 minutes since the American searchlight switched on,
The radar reality, the Americans weren't just seeing them. They were firing faster, more accurately at night than the Japanese did during the day. American ships could fire 30-round salvos in a minute, each round guided by precise radar data, rendering the target helpless.
Panic overcame shouted. Abandon the survivors. Turn around. Retreat to Rabaul.
The abandonment of the soldiers on the stricken transport ships was a cruel yet tactically sound decision. His remaining 2 destroyers fled at maximum speed, escaping the hell of light and sound.
The immediate result was disaster.
Four Japanese destroyers were sunk or completely disabled. Over 1,800 soldiers and sailors were killed or left at sea, awaiting their fate.
0% of the resupply cargo reached the waiting units.
This was a double failure: tactical and humanitarian.
Twist, the final twist. Years later, declassified records revealed that the reason the Americans decided to attack immediately
If they hadn't issued that immediate attack order and waited for the
No. The truth is, even in retreat, the Japanese ships could not escape the vision of the SG radar.
Sato's ragged breath, the shout of the American sailors in the CIC, and that cold ping.
When the smoke finally cleared, the world was no longer the same. Japan's night combat tactics.
The era of electronic information had begun.
The quick victory of the U.S. Navy due to SG radar was not just a technological win.
It was a psychological shock that shattered all of the Japanese Imperial Navy's night operations tactics in the Solomon campaign.
The tactical consequences of that night spread, making every subsequent Tokyo Express run a predictable suicide mission. The human toll was horrific. Over 1,800 individuals were abandoned at sea, including infantrymen and crew.
They did not die from direct shell fire, but from the cold indifference of the ocean and the cruel retreat order from above.
Among the survivors later rescued, the story of technological failure was widely disseminated.
They did not fear the Americans. They feared the invisible eye of the Americans, seeing through the dark.
The forgotten aspect. Infantry units on distant islands like Bougainville and New Georgia, men who were waiting for that cargo, faced a grim reality: starvation.
Without food, without ammunition, they were forced to forage in the tropical jungle, fighting not only the enemy but also disease and despair. The death rate from disease and starvation on these islands in late 1943 was even higher than the death rate from combat.
The Japanese had to admit they no longer had a monopoly on night fighting.
This forced them to resort to extremely costly and risky tactics, such as continuous aerial reconnaissance, or only moving during the day.
The rise of the CIC. This victory proved the value of the Combat Information Center on American ships.
This was an organizational innovation more important than the radar itself. CIC turned the warship into a central nervous system, where intelligence, radar, and fire control were integrated.
Impact on high command. This defeat eroded the Japanese leadership's confidence in the defense capabilities of the Solomon outposts.
It paved the way for the American island hopping strategy, bypassing fortified strongholds like Rabaul and countermeasure development. The Japanese attempted to develop their own countermeasures and radar sets.
The Japanese Model 22 radar, introduced later, was still significantly inferior to the S.
While American commanders at naval bases received congratulations and medals for the 6-minute victory,
The American soldiers actually engaged in the fighting had to confront the humanitarian pain.
I felt no joy of victory.
I only saw the burn marks on the water and heard the cries of the drowning.
Our technology brought victory, but the suffering was equal.
This is the heartbreaking contrast. Tactical victory accompanied by immense human cost, borne by both sides.
The Americans gained the battlefield advantage, but they paid a price in moral distress, witnessing the massacre.
Modern comparison. Looking back, we see modern warfare has
Today, AI and cyber warfare systems can disable entire infrastructures with a single click.
The level of dependence on information has increased exponentially. Admiral Sato's soldiers lost due to lack of information.
Today's soldiers risk losing due to information overload or disinformation.
But that was only the cost the world could see.
The tragedy of the Japanese destroyer transport convoy in the Solomons was not just a forgotten naval battle.
It was a prince of the long-term like Imperial Navy.
Strategically, this defeat ended all Japanese hopes of regaining the initiative in the Pacific.
Following the incident, the U.S. Navy was more confident in deploying smaller formations of radar-equipped destroyers and cruisers into night.
This created a vicious cycle. Japan was forced to hold back its capital ships, aircraft carriers, battleships at rear bases.
to preserve them from invisible night ambushes. This passivity allowed the U.S. the time and space to effectively execute the island-hopping campaigns.
Rabaul, the Sea Eagle fortress, was ultimately completely bypassed. It was never directly attacked.
Instead, it was slowly strangled, because the resupply ships could no longer reach it.
The toll on resources and the mental state of the Japanese troops isolated on this island after the war became a persistent trauma in their memory.
Lessons on innovation and culture. The deepest lesson of this battle was not about torpedoes or cannons, but about the difference in military culture between the two nations.
Japanese culture, perfection and rigidity. Japanese military culture focused on
their pride became a deadly blind spot.
American culture, pragmatism and adaptability. American culture, driven by massive industry and engineering thinking, prioritized function over form. They quickly accepted a nascent technology, integrated it into their combat system, and even changed fundamental tactics CIC to maximize its benefit. The Pacific War, ultimately, was a war of physicists versus samurais.
The physicists won.
Connection to modern reality. Admiral Sato's defeat is a classic reminder of the obsolescence of strategy when it is detached from technological innovation.
In the 21st century, the fight between SG radar and darkness.
Contemporary conflicts, from cyberspace to UAV warfare, are all based on the same principle. Whoever has the fastest.
If the Japanese commanders faced political pressure in accepting radar, modern leaders face pressure in accepting
the viral what-if question. If Japan had not chosen to fight by honor,
perhaps. But the cost and time would certainly have been different.
Conclusion. The story of Admiral Sato and his transport convoy is a permanent warning. The ships sank.
History does not repeat. It waits for people to repeat their mistakes.
In the end, all that remains is an open echo, the invisible ping of radar.